Hello, everybody. I am Jax James, NORML State Policy Manager, here today to chat with you guys about new and moving legislation from across our country. So as you guys know, I've been tongue twister. Hello today. I've been joining you guys weekly to give updates on what is going on with legislation across the country. There's been a lot of great things that have happened so far this session. A lot of states are kind of winding down on their legislative sessions, but some are still continuing on. So we're going to go over our state policy update for today. I encourage y'all, as always, drop where you're watching from in the comments so that I can come back and see if there's any extra information I can give you there. Of course, every action alert that we are tracking can be found at norml.org/act. For your specific state, you can hover over your state on that dynamic map and it will pop up any moving legislation. And of course, at the top of the ACT page is where you will find our federal action alerts, which I do anticipate that next week you will be getting a federal update from our federal policy person, Morgan Fox. So let's get started for today. Of note, we'll start with some legalization legislation. In Ohio, HB 168 creates a regulated market for adult use of cannabis. Those 21 and up would be able to possess 5 ounces of flower, 15 grams of hash, 8 grams of cannabis concentrates, and can cultivate up to 12 plants in their home. Additionally, the legislation establishes an expungement process for minor possession charges. So in Minnesota, there has been some more movement. As you guys know, there's two companion bills. Last week, lawmakers resolved the differences between the House-backed and Senate-backed measures and then reapproved them. The legislation is now going through the process of being sent to the Democratic Governor, Tim Walz, who is expected to sign the legislation early next week, making Minnesota the 23rd legal marijuana state. Now, what would this legislation do? It would permit adults to purchase up to 2 ounces from licensed retailer, as well as lesser quantities of concentrates or edibles, home cultivate up to 8 plants, possess up to 2 pounds in private. It further facilitates automatic review and expungement of records for those that have been previously convicted of certain marijuana-related violations, and on-site consumption would be allowed at certain permitted events. Now, municipal officials will be able to impose regulations regarding the total number of cannabis businesses and their locations, but they may not prohibit their operation. Now, a few additional bills that I want to highlight today. In Louisiana, HB 286 allows those with marijuana possession misdemeanor offenses to file a motion for expungement of their record 90 days following their conviction. First-time offenders would be exempt from the processing fee, and this bill has passed the Louisiana House with a vote of 39-30. It now heads to the Senate. So if you're in Louisiana, let your senator know that you support this legislation. Now, in Maine, newly filed legislation LD 1952 creates cannabis hospitality establishments, which would allow consumers over 21 to smoke or ingest cannabis at an on-site location where cannabis has also been purchased. It also regulates delivery services and permits consumers to order marijuana products online. Out of Nevada, SB 277 allows dispensaries to obtain dual licensure, therefore allowing them to serve both medical patients and adult consumers. The bill also increases the allowable purchasing limits to 2.5 ounces. Now, SB 277 has been heard in the Nevada Senate Finance Committee, but is currently pending a vote. Talking about New Hampshire, HB 431 sought to permit qualifying patients and designated caregivers to home cultivate cannabis for therapeutic use. Under existing law, qualified patients must purchase cannabis from licensed dispensaries. So HB 431 has been tabled until next year in New Hampshire. So looking forward to being able to bring that back to the forefront in New Hampshire, one of the last bastions that don't have a regulated cannabis market yet. In the Northeast, I should say more specifically. In New York, we've got two new bills we wanted to highlight. AB 7159, which enacts tenant protections for medical marijuana patients. The bill prohibits landlords from engaging in conviction proceedings against certified medical marijuana patients solely based on their cannabis use, their medical cannabis use. Additionally, AB 7014 repeals Section 490 of the tax law pertaining to the taxation of medical cannabis and medical cannabis products. In Pennsylvania, a bill that has been refiled is HB 983, which would amend the Pennsylvania DUI laws by eliminating zero tolerance THC per se standards for authorized medical patients. Under the measure, prosecutors would need to show proof of actual impairment in order to find a patient guilty of a marijuana related DUI. Now, before we get to a few bills that we oppose that have been enacted and have failed, I want to remind you guys to drop where you're watching from in the comments so I can come back and take a look and see what other items I can cover in your state. So, two bills that I want to cover that NORML is currently opposing. Out of Maine, legislative document 1946 seeks to increase taxes on the adult use cannabis and cannabis products beginning on or after October 1st of this year. It would increase the rate from 5.5% to 10%. In New York, SB 7199 would provide local authority to communities to enact prohibitions on cannabis use and dispensary operations. So we do oppose both of those efforts, one in Maine, one in New York. Now let's talk about some enacted legislation. In Maryland, HB 1071 prohibits the odor of cannabis, the suspicion of possession of cannabis, the presence of money near cannabis, all of these from being considered probable cause for police to search a person's vehicle. It stipulates a law enforcement officer may not initiate a stop or search of a person, a motor vehicle, or a vessel based solely on one or more of the following: the odor of burnt cannabis or unburnt cannabis, possession or suspicion of possession of cannabis that does not exceed a personal amount, the presence of cash or currency in the proximity to cannabis. Evidence discovered or obtained in violation of this section is not admissible in trial, a hearing, or any other proceeding. Provisions in the new law also reduce penalties for the public use of cannabis to a civil fine of $50 for the first offense and $150 for any of the subsequent offenses. Now, another bit of enacted legislation is in Montana. HB 128 extends an existing moratorium restricting the pool of applicants eligible to obtain licensure to participate in the adult use marijuana market to those whose prior involvement in the state medical cannabis industry. This bill extends the moratorium from July 1st, 2023, all the way to July 1st, 2025. Now, lastly, before I come back to the comments to see where you guys are watching from, let's talk about, unfortunately, a piece of failed legislation. So in New Hampshire, two bills dealing with a legalized cannabis market, HB 639 and HB 360, were both previously passed by members of the House. However, they failed in the Senate 14-10, largely along party lines, with all but one of the Senate Democrats voting yes and all but one of the Senate Republicans voting no. Both bills sought to legalize the adult use of marijuana and establish a state licensed marketplace. After the vote, Governor Sununu issued a statement reversing his past opposition to adult use legalization, but indicating that he only supports a system that allows for retail cannabis products to be sold in state-run stores. Currently, the House is working on sending a compromise adult use bill to the Senate before the deadline to work in this part of the biennium. So while HB 639 and SB 360 may have failed, there are still efforts afoot to get the kind of legislation that Sununu is willing to authorize across the finish line. So kind of a mixed bag in New Hampshire. All right, I'm going to come back over here to y'all's comments so we can discuss what's going on in your state. Hello, comments. How are you doing today? All right, so in Florida, I see we have people watching. Um, there is one bit of legislation currently active in Florida, and that is legislation having to do with telehealth. So you can participate in that action alert. Let's see. Maryland, as you guys know, several bills have passed. We've been covering that. Legislature has closed for the session, so new legislation will be filed later. So good job, Maryland. You guys are going to be rolling out a legalization program shortly and have had other improvements having to do with parental protections or odor as cause to search and seize enacted. Louisiana. Now, there are a few bills in Louisiana. Let's get to my handy-dandy spreadsheet. There's legislation to decriminalize, depenalize, expungement provisions, patient benefits protections, employment protections, and medical improvements. So all of those are currently in the mix. So anyone that I'm talking to right now or is watching this later, you just go to normal.org/act, hover over your state, and it'll show you all of the active and moving legislation in your state. Pennsylvania. So I did go over the DUI bill that was just recently filed, but there's also legislation to add edibles to the medical program, legislation having to do with legalization, legislation having to do with medical cannabis reimbursements as well. All right, let's see. Indiana, I believe, is out of session right now. Yes, Indiana's session ended at the end of April, so nothing active there. Let's see, Arizona. There is some legislation having to do with insurance coverage, tenant protections, and expanding medical to include autism and PTSD, so you can act to support those. Let's see. Illinois. I think Illinois is pending one bill having to do with odor, but it's getting close to the end of the session, so I'm not sure if that will make it across the finish line in time. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching today. I have a personal announcement that I wanted to share with all of you who have been watching and taking actions with me over the past year and a half plus. I have really been enjoying being NORML's state policy manager, but recently I have been offered a really wonderful full-time position, and it's with a different company, not this nonprofit organization. It's been a difficult decision, but I have decided to take the offer. I gave the notice to NORML at the end of March, but I will be continuing on as the executive director for Texas NORML. I have been working with the team at National NORML to make sure that we're set up with success, having the appropriate documentation, and I even have a prospective replacement in mind that I have told them about. In order to make it a smooth transition, I had decided to delay my start date at my new job until June 1st so that I could close out the busy portion of legislative sessions across most of the country and many states, and the actual end of session in many cases. I look forward to continue to track all of the efforts that people are making locally in Texas and statewide. I'll be working with y'all still in Texas. I have really enjoyed working with so many powerful advocates across the country. It has been a pleasure, and we really have accomplished so much together. And so I just wanted to touch on a few of the things that I've been able to work on over the last year and a half with NORML and our stakeholders and our colleagues. So, in Maryland, I worked on the register to vote and get out the vote efforts for the referendum, as well as all of the legislative efforts that have been going on this session. In Minnesota, I worked on the legalization bill that should be signed by the governor next week. We watched Delaware become the 22nd state to legalize cannabis, working closely with the coalition members there. Kentucky became the 38th state to enact a medical cannabis program. In Missouri, I worked on registering to vote, getting out the vote campaigns, as well as working on the constitutional amendments legislative efforts during this session with our NORML chapter there. In Rhode Island, we were able to work on the passage of adult use cannabis market legislation. Mississippi became the 37th state to enact a medical cannabis program. I was able to work on a lot of local ballot initiative efforts, as well as employment, patient, parent, and consumer protections, expungement efforts, home cultivation, opposing bad bills like THC caps, and so much more. We've been able to really move the goalpost on a lot of things across the country. There is our legislative review from 2022 that you can check out. You can also see what bills have been enacted or currently have action alerts on norml.org/act. But today is going to be my last live stream with you guys. So I just wanted to thank all of you for listening, participating, taking action, for supporting NORML and the work that we do, and for always letting me know where you're watching from so that I can hopefully empower you and help you move the needle in your state. So on that note, this is going to be my last live stream with you guys as many states close out their session. And I want to thank all of my friends at NORML. I started volunteering with Texas NORML back in 2005 and have been volunteering or working with NORML in some capacity since then, and it has really been a pleasure. So I thank you all for tuning in, and instead of tuning out, digging in and making sure that we are getting legislation advanced across this country. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you for a great time, a great tenor at NORML. I feel very blessed to have participated in so many winning, important, and effective campaigns across our country. So take care, friends. Till next time. Well, in Texas, till next time. Across the rest of the country, I appreciate you guys. Have a great day.